Hey there, Internet. This week we've got an industry in turmoil. Well, slightly more than usual anyways, with unions, strikes, AI takeovers, and incompetent CEOs. But don't worry, we've also got some great game reveals, releases, and a surprising amount of Steam news. Last week we touched on Microsoft's Game Pass scheme and the FTC's displeasure, so if you want to check that out, please do. But for now, let's jump right in with our first story. Activision secretly experimented on 50% of Call of Duty players by decreasing skill-based matchmaking and determined players like SBMM even if they don't know it. The headline ripped right from PC Gamer says it all. I'll be the first to criticize, well, everything about Activision at this point, but the study is actually a pretty neat thing to see. So back in early 2024, Activision started experimenting with 50% of the North American player population in Call of Duty Modern Warfare 3, but they didn't tell anyone. While the skill-based matchmaking system wasn't completely eliminated during these tests, Activision did tone it down quite a bit. And according to their own findings, during these tests, a little more than 90% of players in the test group played less of the game, indicating a massive drop in player enjoyment, while the remaining 10% increased their playtime. So in a nutshell, 90% of players hated it, while the top 10% of players enjoyed it even more. Imagine that, 10% of the best players in the world had a ton of fun stomping on the less skilled players. Who would have thought? Now, as hilarious as this test is, there are still valid reasons for why players hate skill-based matchmaking, and it's simple. Not everyone who loads up their favorite game wants to go full try-hard sweaty mode. Lots of players just want to chill and enjoy the game without feeling like they've got to channel their inner pro gamer. Of course, tons of these sorts of competitive shooters already have some sort of unranked or quick play mode precisely for that kind of play, but oftentimes even those modes are matching you with players of relative skill. So while it would be easy to say gamers don't know what they want, and that's definitely true sometimes, it's still a bit of a reductionist view on the matter. There's not much more to add here, but it is a cool study that I wish we could see more of. If developers and publishers were more transparent on how their systems work, not only would we see fewer angry gamers, but we'd likely see an improvement of the overall systems. There's a reason that games that enter early access often turn out better for it. Developer and player collaborative feedback is almost always a positive. And yeah, I know it can be bad, but on the whole, transparency is almost always better for the consumer and the product. And speaking of things better for consumers, gamers, we have been somewhat successful in our campaign against EA and Apex Legends' new Battle Pass scheme. That's right, EA are walking back some of the changes they announced a couple weeks back, which set off a review bombing campaign against the game's monetization. Originally, the changes that were introduced got rid of the player's ability to earn enough in-game currency to buy the Battle Pass, while also adding a second $10 Battle Pass per season, meaning players who had previously been buying the Battle Passes by playing the game would now be expected to drop not just $10, but an extra $10 for both Battle Passes combined. Thanks to the public outrage, EA and Respawn have walked back some of the changes by re-implementing the ability to earn enough currency to buy the passes without having to drop real cash. The passes will still be split, but at least players can earn the in-game currency instead of opening up their wallets. And yeah, there was some pseudo-apology BS in the announcement and a half-hearted acknowledgement that they need to be better, but if you really believe that nonsense, I've got two $10 battle passes to sell you. Blizzard is another company taking some steps back this week in a desperate attempt to repair the damage they've done to their own brands. Overwatch, now that's a name I haven't thought about in quite some time. It is looking to do some 6v6 testing as a first step to potentially reversing the move to 5v5 that happened with the launch of Overwatch 2. But before you 6v6 enjoyers get too excited, game director Aaron Keller isn't sold on the change. Reading through the director's take on Blizzard's website, it's clear that Keller is laying the foundation for more conversation regarding the potential change, but not really committing to anything just yet, which is frankly a good attitude to see. If you're not an Overwatch fan, the 5v5 versus 6v6 debate has long been a hotly debated topic ever since the change was originally announced and then implemented. Both crowds are quite vocal, and both crowds have their pros and cons. So here's to hoping that the team's testing results in a better game for both camps, or at least doesn't make it worse, which Overwatch has had a tendency to do somehow. And it is a tough time to be a hero shooter, as developer Firewalk is also trying to salvage Concord's flagging reputation this week with the announcement that the game will not have a battle pass, nor will it charge for one in the future. The devs also proclaimed that the game will have regular post-launch seasons and updates that will be free for players. Gameplay animation director Mark DeRitter even tweeted out, "You own Concord. Concord doesn't own you, which is a bit on the nose really, but it gets the point across. Of course, these announcements come after 2 beta weekends with very, very low turnouts, and the cynic in me wonders if Concord did originally have some kind of battle pass, but after seeing the less than enthusiastic response, they're now revamping their monetization in hopes of garnering some goodwill from gamers. But that's just my grumpy gamer brain. It's been an interesting time following the apathy surrounding Concord, and I'm definitely curious to see how it shakes out this August 23rd when the game finally launches for PC and PS5. But let's move away from industry damage control and onto a few reveals. We got to look at Warner Brothers Games, Harry Potter Quidditch Champions this week, and yeah, I'm not sure what to think about this one. The gameplay that was shown wasn't all that instructive on how the game will actually play, and the aesthetics are decidedly mobile looking. We did get a glimpse at career progression mode though, and it looks like players will be progressing all the way from the Hogwarts Quidditch pitch up to the World Cup stage as the game's namesake. There will also be an online competitive mode, as well as the ability to create your own Quidditch player with what looks to be a decent amount of customization. At $30 for the standard edition and $40 for the deluxe, it's safe to say that this is a small niche game hoping to capitalize on the Harry Potter fandom, but hey, Warner Brothers have confirmed there is no MTX in the game, so there's that. If you are interested in checking this one out, you can grab it for the PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, and the Xbox Series X and S this September 3rd, with a Switch version coming sometime later this year. This next one is, well, this is one I think would be easier to show than to describe, so here you go.
To make your dreams come true, the choice is up to you, 'cause everything leads to love.
Yep, in Date Everything, you date everything. Thanks to your Dateviator glasses, you will be able to see and interact with your anthropomorphic household items. Doesn't matter if it's a vacuum cleaner or simply air and water, you can date it. Each character, item, thing, whatever, each of them will have 3 ending scenarios with love, friend, or hate that you will unlock via your interactions during gameplay. And lest you think this is just a silly throwaway game, it has over 100 voiced characters and 70,000 voiced lines. Unfortunately for those looking to hook up with your kitchen sink, there is no release date for this one just yet, but we do know it'll be out for the PC, PS5, Xbox Series X and S, and the Switch at some point. And this next one is for the cozy gamers out there who want a little bit more medieval, dreary desperation in their comfortable life sims. In all seriousness though, Mirthwood looks to be pretty interesting. Obviously, this is a Harvest Moon, Stardew Valley kind of game, but with a medieval twist, and the twist isn't just the setting and the art style. No, in Mirthwood, homesteading comes with some real dangers, including death to both you and your villagers. As you explore the game world, you'll be contending with not only beasts and monsters, but disease and the harsh realities of pre-industrial winters. Furthermore, while you're free to play the game as a cozy life sim and, get to know all the villagers and helping people and being that typical good Samaritan, you can also be a less likable sort and steal from your neighbors. I'm not sure just how villainous you can become, but it's not often these life sims allow you to be anything other than an upstanding citizen. There is a demo to check out if you're interested, and I suggest you do it because this is a different take on the genre, but if it does resonate with you, you'll be able to pick it up this September 11th on Steam. Hey guys, unfortunate news has just dropped after this video was completed. Bungie has announced a 17% layoff, meaning 220 staff are now out of a job. But the bad news doesn't end there for Bungie, as a further 12% or 155 staff are going to be integrated into Sony. Furthermore, yeah, we're not done. An unannounced action game is being handed off to a new Sony studio. CEO Pete Parsons blames rising development costs, economic conditions, and overall industry shifts as the reason for the layoffs. Going on to explain in the announcement that Bungie basically stretched itself too thin to maintain their current pace. These layoffs follow a previous round last October where 100 staff members were also let go. While it is great that some workers are being able to transition over to Sony rather than being out of work entirely, all this bodes quite ill for Bungie. Though the company is still over 800 strong, Sony has been increasingly butting into the studio's business. It's at the point now, especially after this news, that I will be surprised if Bungie is still around a few years down the road. Once Destiny 2 starts to fall off, unless something big changes, I'm afraid the entire studio is running on borrowed time. Bungie Global Community Lead Dylan Gaffner put words to how we're all feeling. Inexcusable. Industry-leading talent being lost yet again. Accountability falling on the workers who have pushed the needle to deliver for our community time and time again. Please maintain focus on those who have lost their position and income. Offer help where you can. And while the angry gamer in me wants to rage at the idiotic behavior of these companies, Mr. Gaffner is right. Our focus should be on those who now find themselves out of a job in a market that doesn't want them. Let's hope they find somewhere better in the coming weeks and months. Back to past Leebs. Last week, I highlighted the SAG-AFTRA vote, which would likely lead to a voice actor strike in the games industry, and not a day later, it happened. The long and short of it is AI, because of course it is. While many of the issues raised during the last 18 months of negotiation between SAG-AFTRA and the games industry has resulted in a number of agreements, AI is still a standout issue. Until the industry agrees on strong protections for voice actors and actresses when it comes to cloning and generative AI, I would expect this strike to last potentially quite some time. And it makes sense. No matter how many other concessions that the game industry makes, AI is the future whether we like it or not. Sure, right now AI still needs a lot of work, but it's improving exponentially. And if protections aren't put in place now, well, they never will be. Rather than get bogged down in the details of the strike, let me just lay out the important bits for us as gamers. Firstly, as long as SAG-AFTRA remains on strike, its members will not be doing any voice acting work for any of the companies involved in the negotiations, which I will display on screen here. So yeah, that's the bulk of the big games industry companies. However, this does not include any titles in development before September 2023, which means GTA 6, which has been highlighted all over the internet this week, is currently not impacted by the strike. Non-union voice actors are also obviously not bound by the strike. So in the short term, the strike isn't likely to make much of an impact, which is precisely why I assume the strike will last for quite a while. As more and more new titles enter development, these big companies will have to make some decisions regarding just how to handle their voiceover work. In other words, until their bottom line is impacted, I wouldn't expect to see any changes in the situation. And since it may take a number of months before those impacts are seen by investors, well, that's how you get a long strike. And of course, the longer the strike goes on, the more delays we're likely to see from projects started after September 2023, and naturally any new projects starting up now. In some other union news, World of Warcraft developers have fully unionized, with the Communications Workers of America confirming that over 500 employees have formed a wall-to-wall union to pair it to the phrase. Called the World of Warcraft Game Makers Guild, the over 500 employees make up the entirety of the development team, from designers and engineers to artists and QA. And yeah, this is a huge plus for workers in the industry as a whole, and I'd expect to see some ripples in the coming months as more developers fight to protect themselves. This is what happens when you lay off over 20,000 people in the span of 2 years amidst record profits and record CEO earnings. Not long after the SAG-AFTRA strike started, the new Warcraft union released a statement standing in solidarity with the voice actors, as did the UK arts union Equity, but unfortunately for them, due to UK legislation, Equity is unable to join in on the strike action, as performers who wish to take part will not have legal protection against being dismissed or sued for breach of contract. So clearly, we've got a long way to go before this situation is resolved, not only in terms of our favorite voice casts, but global game development as a whole. And as if to highlight that fact, it was revealed this week that Activision has allegedly okayed the use of generative AI tools, including Midjourney and Stable Diffusion, going forward, with one former employee claiming that Activision had assured its artists that generative AI would be used only for internal concepts, not final game assets, and that AI would not be used to replace them. Boiling frog metaphor, anyone? Imagine a suit coming up to you after laying off over 1,900 of your fellow developers and saying, hey, we want to train you on these AI tools that do your job for you, but don't worry, your job is totally fine, totally safe, nothing to worry about. Can I still complain about this timeline, or is the meme dead? Because I want out of this timeline. Perhaps even a timeline where Fallout takes place across the pond? Corny segue aside, Fallout London is live and in the wild, which, yes, it's a mod and not a standalone game, but a lot of us have been looking forward to this one for quite a while. After the dev team had to delay the launch thanks to Bethesda's undercooked next-gen patch, we were finally able to get our hands on it last Thursday. What makes this mod so noteworthy is its sheer scale. This isn't your standard replace a few NPCs, add some new items, and call it a day mod. No, this is a total conversion of Fallout 4 set in London. It has full voice acting, a very large map, and it finally gives Fallout fans a peek of what the Fallout world might look like outside of the United States. If you are interested in checking it out, you'll need to own Fallout 4, of course, but you'll also need to get your hands dirty with the install process, especially if you're using a copy other than Good Old Games. And yes, the mod is hosted at GOG because it's simply too big for a standard Nexus download. The good news is that there's already helpful information out there for players who aren't comfortable with mods, or if you do have the GOG version already, you can install Fallout London with just a few clicks. That said, even the GOG version may result in some crashes that need addressing. I love mods, and it would be really cool to make some video content about different great mods out there. So if you are interested in that kind of content, let me know down below. And no, that's not just a gimmick to get you to comment. If I see that there's some genuine interest in mod-related content, I'll likely make a video or two to see how they do. And while we're on the topic of timelines, yeah, I'm gonna milk this metaphor for as much as I can. This week we had a handful of nostalgic game releases, so let's escape the corporate BS and retreat into rose-tinted, glorious nostalgia for a few minutes. First up is a bit of a surprise. 16 years after the original debut and 12 years after making it over to Steam, Castle Crashers is getting a new DLC. The Painter Boss Paradise content will include new artwork for all characters and an entirely new character in Paint Jr. The release will also give players the ability to use the Steam Workshop, breathing even more life into the aging game. No release date yet, but we do know it's only coming to Steam, so bad news for Sony and Nintendo players, at least for the time being. Continuing the eye on nostalgia, we also got Star Wars Bounty Hunter the Remaster. Originally released way back in 2002, Bounty Hunter is something of a cult classic, as it was one of the first times gamers got to engage with a story not focused on the Jedi. Instead, you play as Jango Fett, bounty hunting your way through the galaxy. The original had that classic early 3D jank to it, so I am curious to see how Aspyr handle bringing the controls into the modern era. And did I mention it's made by Aspyr? Because it is. So, as usual, it will be a toss-up to whether this is the good Aspyr remaster or a bad one. I'll definitely be waiting to see the reviews before I fork over any cash, but hey, you do you. Bounty Hunter is already live and available for the PC, PS4, PS5, Xbox One, Xbox Series X and S, and the Switch. Tomba Special Edition is also getting a new lease on life this week with a heavily updated version of the 1997 classic platformer. Fans of this throwback will be pleased to know that the incarnation will include saving anywhere without a checkpoint, the ability to rewind and retry challenges, an analog control toggle, a museum full of the original artwork and dev documents, a remastered soundtrack, and an interview with the series creator. You know who you are if you're a fan of this one, and on the off chance you didn't know it was coming, surprise, it's available the same day this video goes live. You can pick it up for the PC, PS4, PS5, and the Switch. The last bit of nostalgia we'll cover here is unconfirmed, but a Legacy of Kain statue was spotted at San Diego Comic-Con, with a display featuring a 1 and 2 remaster announcement. I don't really like covering leaks, but in this case, we've got a picture in the wild and it's pretty concrete. However, by the time the event was in full swing, the display had been removed. No word on the remasters themselves or why the display was axed, so it could be that the remasters were cancelled last minute or some other such consideration was made. Moving away from the past and onto something new, you may want to check out Thank Goodness You're Here from developer Coalsupper. This is another one that showing rather than telling would benefit from.
Crikey, look at the size of this lad's marrow. And he's got a huge coat.
So as you can see, Thank Goodness You're Here is an absurd English comedy adventure game, and it is unapologetically British. Oh god. I'm sorry, UK friends, I won't do that again. Atrocious accent aside, I'm setting this one aside for a low energy day when I could use some laughs. It looks to be a bit on the short side, but if you're like me and you want to do the same, you can check it out for the PC, PS4, PS5, Nintendo Switch, and even the Mac. And finally, to round this week's releases out, we've got The Garden Path, which developer Carrot Cake describes as a slice of life sim about the joy of gardening, designed to be picked up and played in short, sweet bites, whether you're fishing, growing, trading, or making new vegetable friends. A wonderful and wistful adventure awaits when wandering the garden path. The cool thing about this one is that the game's clock follows the real world, with the game having 4 seasons within a 28-day time period. So the developers really weren't exaggerating. It's literally designed for you to jump in at different times of the day and see what's going on with your comfy little garden world. This one was already out a few days ago as of the publishing of this video, so if you're looking for a cozy hand-drawn life sim, maybe give it a look. It's on PC and Switch, as well as Linux and Mac. We also had some interesting Steam updates this week, as well as some related Steam news surrounding Dragon Age Veilguard and Sony. For the direct Steam news, Valve has released what they're calling the Great Steam Demo Update 2024. Dramatic titling aside, the update is actually pretty useful. Users will now be able to add and remove demos from their library without installing them first, and this includes if you already own the full game. Developers will now have the option to put their demos on their own pages, complete with user reviews, trailers, and screenshots. These standalone demo pages will also link back to the full game for players interested in buying after trying. Thanks to these new demo pages, users should also find that demos appear more often in the various Steam sections and interfaces, and wishlisters will also be notified when demos are released. Steam users who are tired of dealing with the prologue problem, as it's come to be known, will no doubt find these changes a good step in the right direction. Steam has also been making strides forward in recent weeks to kick cheaters and botters out of Team Fortress 2. After a ban wave some weeks ago, the problem seems fairly contained for now. However, TF2 players, be aware that a new Save TF2 petition is going around and it is a scam. The grift involves direct messages to TF2 players asking them to sign the petition, but all you'll actually be doing is handing over your Steam login information. The real petition is now closed, so hopefully not too many players will fall for the phishing scheme. In some Steam adjacent news, Sony will be releasing their PlayStation VR2 app on Steam next week, August 6th. Owners of the PSVR2 will need a PC adapter, which is being released the following day for $60, as well as a DisplayPort 1.4 cable. But once you have those items, you'll be able to use the app to play VR games on Steam, sans the PlayStation 5 native functionality, which includes HDR, headset feedback, eye tracking, adaptive triggers, and haptic feedback. It's too bad about the eye tracking in particular, but PSVR users having even more games to play is great news. And some other good news, this time for PC players. EA and BioWare have announced Dragon Age Velguard will be Steam native, meaning we will not have to use the horrible EA app, thank God. Definitely a rare conceit from EA, which somehow makes me suspicious, but that's because EA is EA. Still, there is no reason not to give both EA and BioWare props for this move, as it is greatly appreciated. This tweet from industry analyst Matt Piscatella says it all. The margin benefit of forcing people to use a proprietary PC marketplace just isn't worth the lost additional volume of not putting a game on Steam. Now, if only Sony could get that through their collective heads with the PSN crap. And as is tradition, we've got a delay this week. Yes, Stalker 2 is being delayed again, and despite my disappointment, I'd be lying if I said that trailer didn't make me smile.
Really? Again?
The new release date is now November 20th of this year. However, this August 12th, we will be getting a developer deep dive in collaboration with Xbox that the developer promises will release a whole bunch of new never-before-seen content and information. Frankly, despite the insane development time this game has went through and the many delays, I'm more than content to wait. To say these developers have been through something of a hell is no overstatement. We may have to wait a while longer for Stalker 2's first-person romp to release, but Team Jade and Teamy Studio Group, I think is how you pronounce that, revealed that the previously announced closed beta for Delta Force Hawk Ops would now be starting this August 6th. Those of you hoping to get an early look at the tactical FPS can head over to the Steam page and fill out a player survey starting this August 2nd, a day after this video goes live. Last week, we took a look at Humble Games' sudden meltdown as their parent company Ziff Davis laid off the publisher in its entirety, handing it over to an outside third party. And while Ziff Davis have tried to pretend that this change is totally not a closure and that everything is fine, developers are starting to come forward and contradict the claim. Coral Island developer Stairway Games sent out a tweet this week addressing the fact that the destruction of Humble Games leaves consoles in a place of uncertainty, since Humble Games was responsible for updates to all non-PC platforms. In particular, Stairway Games addressed Switch owners who have been patiently waiting a port of Coral Island. Unfortunately, due to a prior NDA with Humble Games, the developers haven't been able to communicate as transparently as they want, and since Humble Games is functionally dead, they now have no way of pushing updates to consoles or moving forward with the ports. While the studio is in talks with lawyers about how to deal with the issue, they are urging anyone who backed the project hoping for a Switch game code to reach out to them via email or on the Discord to swap their key for a Steam code. Unfortunately, Stairway Games isn't alone in this situation, as Squidshock Studios, who just released Bow Path of the Till Lotus, are also left with no word on just how console updates and ports will be handled. Anyone remember the statement that Ziff Davis put out last week addressing the layoffs? Here it is. See how they assure us that the decision was something they carefully thought through? Funny how those careful thoughts have resulted in mass confusion amongst their partner studios, with something as basic as game updates for the consoles now being completely up in the air. It's almost as if they weren't telling the truth. By the way, Ziff Davis owns IGN, who just acquired GamesIndustry.biz, Eurogamer, Rock Paper Shotgun, VG247, and Dicebreaker. Just a bit of information for you to do with what you will. In some more dumbassery, Paradox CEO Frederick Wester, in an interim financial report, revealed that mistakes were made. Mistakes, huh? Is that what you call a 90% quarter-on-quarter drop in operating profits? Funny how these suits can make a little 90% oopsie and still keep their jobs. Wester blames the drop primarily on life by use, high risk, and high costs, which was canceled last June. While acknowledging that wrong calls were made in several projects is a nice bit of accountability, anyone else think it's time the entire board gets laid off for once? Let's give someone else a turn at the wheel, Mr. Wester. Maybe they'll not make as many wrong calls as you have in the past several years. But to close things out this week, we've got some crossover media you may want to check out. Sega and Amazon have released a new teaser for their upcoming Like a Dragon live-action series, which looks promising if sparse on info. Given the recent spat of fantastic and not so fantastic live adaptations, we're all hoping that this one is one of the greats. The first 3 episodes will premiere this October 24th on Prime Video and will feature subs and 30 dubs to suit your needs. On the less promising side of things, it was revealed this week that Netflix's BioShock movie has been scaled down, or as producer Roy Lee said, the new regime has lowered the budget, so we're doing a much smaller version. It's going to be a more personal point of view as opposed to a grander, big project. This referring to the March announcement of Dan Lin as the new film lead, replacing Scott Stubber. Very little is actually known about this project, so it's hard to say what these changes portend, but I'd be lying if I said I was confident in this movie. But here's something I am much more confident in, and for all the Critical Role fans out there. The Moonward has been announced, and it will be a standalone story that takes place in the Midst universe. For those unfamiliar, Midst is a roleplay put out by Critical Role with its own setting, story, music, and script, though there is plenty of improv involved. Each episode is relatively short, at least compared to a D&D style session, and it's very weird and in my opinion quite good once you get into it. It's definitely not for everyone, but if you are into it, you've probably already checked it out. That's gonna wrap it up for this week's news. If you made it to the end, you're a trooper, and I can't thank you enough for your support. I release these videos every Thursday, and I'm currently working on even more gaming content. So if you can, come back next week and hang out, and we'll do it all again. As always, I hope you're having a great day. See ya.